Okay, so this is part 4 of finding joy through life's challenges, and it's very much based on the Book of Joy by Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama. So, but first I like to just recap. Okay, so according to the principle, we are created for joy. That's our very purpose of existence. Joy arises when we have an object partner in which our internal nature and external form are reflected and developed. So if you look at this baby, which happens to be my granddaughter, if you look at her face, you can feel something. It's because it's reflecting something within ourselves, kind of the purity and the innocence within ourselves. And it creates an emotional reaction and a warmth in our heart. God wanted his creations to be object partners embodying goodness, that he might take delight in them. So that's what God wants, that all of us can be good objects, good human beings, because then we reflect God's nature. When we fulfill the 3 blessings, we become God's object partners of love and return perfect joy to him. So on every level, individual level, family, society level, in relationship to creation, when we have good object partners, this brings us joy. And joy comes from love. When you are living in the love of God, every cell in your body jumps for joy. This is how God means us to live, intoxicated in love and joy. That's our purpose, to be intoxicated. We think about alcohol, we're intoxicated, so we're taken over by the alcohol, but actually we should be experiencing joy and love every moment of our lives. This is God's intention. So now I come to this, the Book of Joy, in which Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, they share their views and understanding about what it means, what joy means. And Douglas Abrams, he's a writer, and he brought them together in Dar es Salaam, India, where the Dalai Lama lives, and interviewed them. And so they look at life's challenges, and we cannot avoid the challenges in our life. We all experience stress at some time, maybe every day. Who knows how often we experience stress, sadness, anxiety, fear, loneliness, envy, frustration, anger, despair, illness, grief. So our challenges could be quite small and short-lasting, or they could be long and deep. And the question is, can we find joy when we experience any of these? So they discuss 8 pillars of joy, and I already discussed 4 qualities of mind: perspective, humility, humor, and acceptance. So if I make just a quick review, we can say that the kind of perspective we need, which I suppose is the basis, the foundation of seeking joy in life, is to see the bigger picture, not just have a self-centered view, but how does God see things? Can we see through the eyes of God? Can we see not just our own situation, but those of others? And so the Dalai Lama, he had to leave his homeland, driven out by the Chinese. But his perspective is such that he can still find joy in where he lives now, and not just to feel kind of anger and resentment and hurt because of what happened. And then with humility, it's the recognition that we are all God's children, that nobody is more important than anyone or less important than anyone else. We know in the story of the fall that Lucifer became arrogant and jealous and thought he wanted to be equal, if not higher than Adam and Eve. And so in order to experience joy, the kind of perspective we need is not to see that we are better or worse, but to see that we're all God's children, all have equal value. And then with humor, it's important that we're not too serious, especially when we have challenges. Otherwise, we get bogged down in those problems, and we have to try to see the funny side of life. And even if there were no challenges, I think God is a God of humor, and laughter is part of an experience of joy. So we need lots of jokes, and we need to really see the funny side of life. And the fourth quality of mind, acceptance, to accept your reality. Not to think, well, this is how things should be, but to accept this is a reality. So we live in the present and we deal with what we have, even if it's not how we would like it to be. And so now we move on to the four qualities of the heart, which are forgiveness, gratitude, compassion, and generosity. And today, I'm only going to look at forgiveness. So let's look at that. So forgiveness, we could say in a nutshell, is freeing yourself from the past. You know, we like letting a bird go, or we think about a dove as a symbol of peace. So we have many things from our past that maybe we affect us now, whether our childhood, our ancestry, but we have to let it go. Otherwise, it affects our whole life. It can affect our health, our relationships, and trying to find joy in life. These are the words from the book. Acceptance is the final pillar of the mind, and it leads us to the first pillar of the heart, forgiveness. When we accept the present, we can forgive and release the desire for a different past. Douglas Abrams. So let's look into this a little bit more, freeing yourself from the past. So this is what's his name?
Nelson Mandela.
Yeah, Nelson Mandela, yes, thank you. So he was an angry young man, and he was belonged to the militant wing of the ANC, African National Congress. And he was imprisoned for 27 years. And I suppose people who are in prison that long could continue to have bitterness and hatred, but he didn't. He changed. And when he came out of prison, he was a completely changed man. He'd learned to forgive those who had treated him so badly. And he even became president in 1994. And when he became president, he met with Desmond Tutu, and he asked him to begin something called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And that Desmond Tutu would be the person mainly responsible for this. And the idea was to allow people who had suffered to share their stories, and for those who had committed crimes, that if they were truthful and would like talk about what they did, that they could receive amnesty and forgiveness. So this is what they did. And here are some words from the book by Desmond Tutu. He says, forgiveness is the only way to heal ourselves and to be free from the past. Until we can forgive the person who harmed us, that person will hold the keys to our happiness. That person will be our jailer. So forgiveness is not just about the other person. It's about us. And maybe the other person has moved on in their life. But if we harbor resentment and hurt and can't forget what happened, we can't get out of jail. We're stuck there. When we forgive, we become our own liberator. And so in South Africa, I'd like to tell you a story about this girl called Amy Biehl. She was an American student, a graduate, a law graduate, and she went to South Africa as an exchange student, and actually to help Black people prepare for an election, so that for all races to be involved. And so she went there to help. But one evening, she was traveling home with some of her colored friends, and she was confronted by a mob. And this mob threw stones at her car. She was forced to get out. They threw more stones, and then she was stabbed, and she died. So this was a terrible tragedy, because those traveling with her saying, she's on our side. But they were chanting like, for one white, one bullet, one white, one bullet. So they had all of this anger. And anytime they saw a white person, they had revenge in their hearts. The middle picture is a picture of the 4 men who were accused and convicted and jailed for the murder of Amy Biehl. And they were given a long prison sentence. But the parents of Amy Biehl, they came to South Africa to support amnesty for her murderers in 1998. This was during the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And so actually, they were freed. They wanted them to be freed. Because the mother, once she was interviewed once, and she said, well, I can't just stay at home just taking medicine and because I'm so angry. So she actually went one step further, and she set up a foundation in Amy's name and employed 2 of the men who had killed her. So this is going beyond just forgiveness. This is engaging with them. And the picture on the right, many years later, she's posing with one of those people that was responsible for her daughter's death. And this is quite extreme, and we have to question ourselves, could any of us do such a thing? But this is what she did. Then there's a story of Richard Moore. And so Richard Moore, this is in Northern Ireland, and during the Troubles. So when he was a boy of 10 years of age, he was on his way home from school, and a British soldier shot a rubber bullet in his face. It wasn't intentional. It's because children were throwing stones at the soldiers, and this soldier was getting annoyed and wanted to get rid of them, and he fired a rubber bullet, but it blinded this boy. So how did this affect him? Well, his uncle had already been killed in the Troubles there, but he was not a boy that sought revenge. And years later, he actually met the man in the middle picture, Charles Innes, who is the British soldier who shot him. And so Richard, he grew up, he married, he had 2 children, he learned to play the guitar, he started a folk group, and then he founded an organization called Children of Crossfire to help vulnerable children. And this was in 1996. And this charity now helps children in Tanzania, in Ethiopia, and Northern Ireland. So he's not just suffered and learned to forgive, but he's used his life to really benefit other people. And this story comes from the Dalai Lama, because the Dalai Lama was invited to Northern Ireland on the 10th anniversary of the founding of Children in Crossfire. And that's when the Dalai Lama learned about his story. And then years later, the Dalai Lama invited both of these men to Dharamsala in India to share their story. And the Dalai Lama considers Richard Moore his hero. He says he's a real human being. So that's the story of Richard Moore. Then he wrote a book, a memoir about his life called Can I Give Him My Eyes? And there are a few words from this book that I'd like to share. He says this: forgiveness doesn't change the past, but it does change the future. When I was knocked with a rubber bullet, I was knocked on a journey. It has taken me to places and given me wonderful experiences, so I can't say blindness is a terrible thing. If I had to give up all these things to get my eyesight back tomorrow, I would not want it back. Some things are bigger than eyesight. So it just shows that tragedy can completely change a person's life for the good, depending on how they respond. But what about the Dalai Lama? He was asked a question by a child in Dharamsala: can you forgive China for what they have done? So China, they invaded Tibet in 1950 with 40,000 troops and suppressing the people. And despite the Dalai Lama's attempts to come up with some kind of peace proposal, they were rejected. And from time to time, the people have risen up to protest, which has not actually helped the situation. But in 1959, there was an uprising on March the 10th. And March the 10th is considered a special day. And on that particular day, on occasions during all the years that have passed, there has been protests. And actually, so on March the 10th, 2008, a wave of protest against Chinese rule sweep across Tibet. Hundreds of Tibetans were killed and over 2,000 arrested. And so in the book of Joy, the Dalai Lama, he then remembers that. And he was very concerned because whenever there's a protest, it's going to lead to more suffering and more death. So when he was asked about, can you forgive China, this is what he said. I deliberately tried to keep compassion and a sense of concern for the Chinese hardliners. I tried to take their anger, their fear into myself and give them my love, my forgiveness. And this is a Buddhist practice called Tonglen, giving and taking. And so this is what he tries to practice, because he says if he just feels anger, he can't do anything. That's the point. He can't do anything. So this is the only thing he can do, so that he doesn't hold on to the anger and resentment, which won't solve anything. We do not let anger and negative feelings develop toward the Chinese hardliners, but in the meantime, we strongly oppose their actions. We want to protect those who are harmed, but also to protect the person who is harming others, because eventually they too will suffer. So I suppose if you think about all of the people in life who do very bad things, we understand from spirit world viewpoint that their future in the spirit world is going to be pretty dark, because they will suffer because of what they did. And even on this earth, maybe they're suffering regret because of what they did. So this is the way that the Dalai Lama deals with his own country. What about revenge and forgiveness? There are like cycles of revenge and forgiveness. And Desmond Tutu and his daughter wrote a book called The Book of Forgiving. And he talks about these cycles of revenge and forgiveness, because revenge, it becomes a never-ending cycle. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth will just lead to everybody being blind and toothless. So it's like, but if we can get into the cycle of forgiveness, then we can make life so much better. And if you look at this picture of this girl, maybe you can identify, you can feel when you look at this face, you can recognize those moments in your own life when you were hurt. And when you're hurt, it's easy to feel anger or pain and bad feelings towards those that did wrong to you. But at the same time, when you're in this state, you can also learn to not let it stay with you, to quickly take away these feelings. And some research has been done in the world about revenge and forgiveness. And I'd like to talk about research done by Martin Daly and Margot Wilson. They studied 60 different cultures around the world, and they found that 95% had some form of blood revenge. But when psychologist Michael McCulloch looked at the same cultures, he found that 93% of them also displayed some examples of forgiveness and reconciliation. In other words, we have both. We have both the ability to take revenge and also the ability to forgive. But then how we respond to these situations affects our heart rate, facial muscles, and sweat glands. So this research was done by a primatologist called Frans de Waal, and he believes that, okay, sorry, wrong, that was the wrong one. Okay, okay, yes, unforgiveness leads to ongoing feelings of resentment, anger, hostility, and hatred that can be extremely destructive. Even short bursts of it can have significant physical effects. In one study by Charlotte Van Owen Vitelet, she asked people to think about someone who had hurt, mistreated, or offended them. She monitored their heart rate, facial muscles, and sweat glands. When people remembered their grudges, they had a stress response. Their blood pressure and heart rate increased, and they began to sweat. They felt sad, angry, intense, and less in control. When they were asked to empathize with their offenders and to imagine forgiving them, their stress responses returned to normal. And then, in a review of research on forgiveness and health, Everett Worthington and Michael Shearer found that unforgiveness seems to compromise the immune system in a number of ways, including disrupting the production of important hormones and the way that our cells fight infections. But what about animals? Primatologist Frans de Waal believes that such peacekeeping activities are extremely common in the animal kingdom. Chimps, they kiss and make up. And gorillas and other apes, they also can learn to make up. And there are also, from those that have been studied, there are other species, sheep, goats, hyenas, and dolphins. But of the species that have been studied, only one animal has failed to show behavior that reconciles relationships after conflict. Which animal do you think it is? You may have one of these animals at home. The domestic cat. Of course, you know, if you're talking about bigger things in the world that we can have some resentment towards or hard to forgive, but when it's the people closest to us, family members or friends, that can be very hard, because those people you live with day in, day out, or you meet many times, maybe it's a work colleague, and that work colleague angers you, annoys you, and it's really hard to be with them. So I would like to tell the story about Desmond Tutu, because when he had a young family, one day he was traveling with his family and he stopped off at his parents' home, but just for a few hours. And his father, he talked about his father because when he was young, his father was a wonderful man, but when his father was drunk, he was terrible. He was violent, and he, you know, attacked his mother. And his mother was a wonderful person. She wouldn't say a bad word to anybody. And Desmond Tutu, he actually regretted that he never stood up, you know, to his father, or, you know, to stop this. And so he had a lot of resentment, a lot of bad feeling towards his father. But on this one occasion, when his father was an old man and he stopped by one evening, his father came up to him and said, "I'd like to talk to you. Do you have a few minutes?" But Desmond, he was so tired, and he said, "You know, can we talk about it in the morning?" Well, early in the morning, they left, you know, to continue their journey. But then they learned that night that his father had died the previous evening. And so he has such regret that maybe his father wanted to apologize for the way he treated his mother. And so Desmond Tutu, he really feels he lost an opportunity there. And so it's really important that in life, you never know when there's an important moment for us to kind of deal with unresolved problems. So forgiveness, freeing yourself from the past. In one way, we can see it like letting a bird go, letting the memories go, disappear, just forget them, don't hold on to them. But another way to look at it is to break free of these things so that we're not affected. We need to be free. In the same way that Nelson Mandela, he said when he left prison, as I walked out the door toward the gate that would lead me to my freedom, I knew if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I'd still be in prison. So we have to free ourselves from resentment in all areas of our life and practice forgiveness, because that will give us joy. And so as we come to the end of this and review these different pillars, the qualities of the mind, perspective, humility, humor, and acceptance, and the qualities of the heart, forgiveness. So this is where we've reached. And I suppose forgiveness is based upon acceptance and all the other qualities of the mind. But next time I will continue with gratitude, and then onto compassion, and finally generosity. And with that, I'd like to finish. Thank you very much.